You raised $6 million.
Yeah.
And then created something that is generating, you publicly have said, is $134 million of revenue last year. How you're able to do that.
Sun Tzu said, don't worry about victory. Remove the possibility of defeat, and then afterwards, look for victory. So
before we go on, the teams picked out paper airplanes.
I used to love paper airplanes when I was a kid.
It distracts you while we get to ask you really good questions.
Great.
That's the secret.
Hypnosis. Salesforce in 1999 was the first SaaS company, software as a service. Software was the technology, but subscriptions were the business model. Before Salesforce, people forget that software was sold by selling CD-ROMs. And you'd buy one CD-ROM, one license, and that was it.
Yeah. Most founders at this stage, they own 80 to 90% of their company.
Yeah.
The employee pool for that size of company is 8 to 10%. And you gave 50% to your employees.
That's right.
And
well,
I think
it got
like,
even better. It got even better than that.
Yeah, but again, that's why did you do that?
So all the shares we granted were under, vesting schedules.
But it was also born out of necessity. It was a bit of...
What had you really excited, and I'm assuming you're excited, about gaming and AI?
First of all, Cloud Dragon is about to take flight. Ah, it's pretty good.
That was actually the best one. Welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you on. You've been my dear friend, service provider, friend, and co-founder. I said friend twice, but for many years at this point. And so it's great to have you on. And the team asked me a bit about you, and I wanted to kind of share a bit about that, how I described it, because I think
Please.
Yeah, like I described you as you're the master architect, and you're one of the best builder, architecture, system design thinkers that I've met in my life. And I think you're a once in a generation mind around company building and design.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge compliment.
Big shoes to fill, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see if I fall through on that.
Yeah. And so obviously I want to get deep sort of into the human behind the architect, and also how you're thinking of all these systems you're creating from invisible to what we're doing at Infinity, out through exponential, and then also with your family office and your foundation, because I think they all have network effects that are very interesting. But for me, there's a steel thread through all of that stuff. And so for me, what, you've created a company that has helped train 80% of the world LLMs, not just the ticky-tacky data labeling, but the really sophisticated, groundbreaking stuff, Invisible's embedded with those research teams at all the AI companies that we would name. So you could go sit up on the couch, not do anything the rest of your life, live a pretty great life, but you're creating, you're building, you're system designing. What drives you?
When I was a child, I loved playing Legos and building castles in my bedroom. I had a bunk bed, and I would drag a sheet across the top and make it a fort. And I would wear a cape and go into the yard and grab a stick and imagine I was playing with dragons and fighting dragons. And so for me, building companies feels a little bit like that. It's like building an imaginary world. And so I think the inner child is key in entrepreneurship. There was a Zen master who came from Japan to the United States in the 70s, and he said, in a beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in an expert's, there are few. And so I like to stay in that childlike, imaginary place. Even Jesus said, the kingdom belongs to the children. Heraclitus from ancient Greece said, eternity is a game played by children. It's like children building sandcastles by the seashore. And so I hope I never lose that childlike state. My parents haven't retired yet. I think a lot of people who truly enjoy what they do just don't retire.
Yeah.
They just keep going. So I'm 36. It would be kind of absurd if I retired at 36. I'm sure I've got more to give. Now, there's definitely a difference in the role. I'm so glad that I've got you and Matt. Matt is the CEO of Invisible. Yep. You're the CEO of Infinity. I'm much happier in the chairman role than I was in the CEO role in my 20s and early and mid 30s.
But you're still very much a co-founder in these businesses, and you're highly active. So I know other chairmen of family offices and big investors, and they're much more like in the strategy, kind of in the back room, playing the allocator. Like you're in it, chopping it up in all the companies. And I think like one of the things that I personally think is like the most incredible thing that you have is you eat glass like no one else's business in founding. Like you are just a tough guy. And I think like, like that is something I think is like really interesting, because it's like the imagination and the creation. Like I think a lot of people with a lot of money or abundance can do that and flip into that. I think the thing that's unique is like you still chew glass every day. Like why?
Most of the value is created in the beginning, but beginnings are difficult. In the oldest book of ancient China, the I Ching, which is the book of changes, there are 64 situations in life. And the first one represents the creative energy, and the second one represents the receptive energy, so yang and yin. And the third is literally called difficult beginnings. Difficult beginnings. Invisible had a very difficult beginning. And my career had a difficult beginning. My first company failed. Invisible had a difficult beginning. The first 4 to 5 years was that, chewing glass, staring into the abyss.
Yeah. We literally wear shirts in Infinity that say not googly enough.
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Well, Francis, you're an intern at Google.
That's right.
And then they chose not to hire you. They said you weren't googly enough.
I wasn't googly
You
enough.
then went and raised money from Peter Thiel to build your first company. It didn't work out.
Nope.
And you went and tried to be Peter Thiel's chief of staff, and he said, I don't need a chief of staff.
Yeah.
And then
got a better one.
Yeah. Then
Who's
you
now
went
my
and
friend.
created. Yeah. Charlie's great. And then you went and created Invisible, which at the time, it's a fucking crazy concept. Like it still is a crazy concept. Whereas like I remember one of my companies that I was a part of, Rhino, was one of the first enterprise customers of Invisible. Right. And I remember like the very first pitch, and the idea is so brilliant, but also abstract that you don't need to hire swaths of people. And this is well before AI. Yeah. You don't need to hire swaths of people. Like you could fractionally do it. And you didn't just go out let's call a Scale AI or others who've raised billions of dollars to go out and get into the data labeling space. You raised $6 million.
Yeah.
And then created something that is generating, you publicly have said, is 134 million of revenue last year. It's probably like you and maybe you're the only one in the room that has like done that from like a capital efficiency perspective. Like maybe the folks at Surge, but like
a few others, yeah.
Like that is like beyond chewing glass. Like that in my mind is like you're like almost launching rockets, but in the OpEx personnel space. And so love the philosophy behind it, but like have you dug into the like how you're able to do that? Like how, like, are you just like a frog in a hot tub at this moment and you don't realize like how hot it is, or like,
Sun Tzu said, don't worry about victory. Don't worry about victory. Remove the possibility of defeat. And then afterwards, look for victory. So I think that's true both psychologically, like in the psychology, the mind of the founder.
Yeah.
Like you first have to achieve victory in your own mind, in your own heart. Like the founder becomes an undefeatable person at some point, because even if you kill them, they still win. It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi to Darth Vader. Strike me down, and I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. You enter a mindset, and that mindset becomes indomitable. There's the Agakure, the Book of the Samurai, and it says, "Just become insane and desperate to die. 10 men cannot stand against such a man." And I remember I read that at the lowest of the low points, like when Invisible had ran out of money, we had one client, we were bootstrapping, we had this huge vision. Every investor thought it was like a dumb idea. I couldn't afford rent in San Francisco. I was staying at my grandparents' ranch in the middle of nowhere. And I read that, and I remember like I cried, and I was like, okay, I'm just not actually, I need to, first of all, question myself, like, do I really still believe in the strategy? Why? From first principles. Why do I believe this is a good idea and worth spending my time? Review that logic, And if the logic is worth running, if the hypothesis is worth testing, if it makes sense to give this experiment a shot, then I need to then just go for it, and accept the outcome, whatever it is. That's a powerful mindset. And I think you have to get there, but entrepreneurship is ultimately a crucible. It really is a crucible. And I think there's no way, the butterfly in the cocoon, we act in compassion and we want to help it out of the cocoon and open up the cocoon, and you kill the butterfly in the process. And in a way, like what we're doing with Infinity is trying to create an incubator. We're creating an incubator. It's a holding company, but it's also an incubator, and we're trying to create a better environment for founders to found companies. There will be a paradoxical possibility that at some point we make it too easy, and we almost make it not hard enough.
Yeah. So from your side, my philosophy that I've learned is and I say this to a lot of the founders I work with, is the army pays a lot of money to convince their soldiers that they're already dead to run up the hill and take the machine gun nest.
Yeah.
And that mindset change was my unlock in founding is my business is already, it's sort of like Schrodinger's cat of startups, right? The business has already failed and it's already successful. So Invisible in that moment was already a $1 trillion company and a failure. You were okay, it doesn't matter. I believe in the execution, I believe in the strategy, and
Correct.
that was your metamorphosis to become the chairman and co-founder you are today.
Yeah.
So before we go on, as part of this podcast is we do stuff.
All right.
And so the team's picked out a fun game puzzle thing, but for you, they want you to build
fun. Paper airplanes. I used to love paper airplanes when I was a kid.
So
my dad would make them.
Yeah, we each get to build. Yeah, they did some research. We each get to build a paper airplane.
That's so fun.
Yeah,
this is going to be great. I haven't done this in forever.
And so it distracts you while we get to ask you really good questions.
Great.
That's the secret.
Hypnosis.
Yeah.
I like it. I know this. I know the game you're playing.
I usually mess this up, so here we go. All right.
This is so fun.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, I think a lot about as a founder.
Does this involve manuals? I'm not so good at following instructions.
It is a build your own adventure. So the end of the podcast, you will have something that is a paper airplane, and then you and I will fly it against each other.
Cool.
And we'll see who goes further.
I know how to make one, so let's see if I remember.
I do not. This one's all right. This one's actually pretty cool. Well, no, I want.
Cool.
We'll figure this out. The thing that I think is not super well known, but incredibly cool, is you then had built one of the largest AI data training companies in the world that's training the most sophisticated part of all these models. And then you're you know what? The scope's actually down from what I thought. I want to build more sandcastles.
Yeah, that's right.
So fuck it. I'm going to go take $5 million of free cash flow.
Yeah.
And start a holding company, which is the Infinity constellation, which I'm the CEO of.
Yep.
But that activity and that action is incredibly hard to do with boards, with governance, with all sorts of things. So I think for most founders looking at that on a venture path, I think if Invisible was not a founder-controlled business, that would have never happened.
That's right.
Right?
Correct.
Because XYZ venture fund would have never allowed it. Right?
That's right.
So can you tell me a bit around and for founders, how do you design controls? And this is one of the first conversations that you and I had, which is how you build boards and how you build governance. How did you maintain control of Invisible to be able to go and do this? And now you've made probably one of the best investments in a generation off the back of another
great investment.
Amazing investment, right?
Yeah. The prophet Cassandra, had the curse of being right, but nobody believed her. Yeah, she was a Greek oracle or seer. I've got my first paper airplane. See, audience, let's see if it flies. This is my.
We need a couple prototypes.
This is my next startup. Well, how do I do it in a way where the camera can see it flying?
Yeah, maybe that's.
Woo!
I'm going back to my elementary school. Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. That's really good. All right. See, now you.
That's a good one. That's more of a bomber than a fighter.
Yeah, but it's gonna go for it.
That's like your B2.
This is like our company debate right here, Francis. But basically, like, the thing I've always thought that, like, is almost a sport for you is board governance.
Yeah.
Which most of us are like, fuck having a board.
Yeah.
Like, Twitter is like, don't ever get a board. And I'm like, who are these people? They're stupid.
It's a little immature,
so, like,
yeah.
let's start with, why are boards great from your perspective?
Yeah.
And then how do you design a board in a way so that you can take $5 million out and start another business?
Yeah.
And what did that require? Because that obviously was a lot of trust and the right people.
Yeah. For anyone in the audience who was that kid in school who was too obnoxious because they had asked way too many questions, and their intuition was to interrupt the teacher and like, what about this? Why? If you play the why game and you want to go 7 questions deep, you're probably a first principles thinker.
Yeah.
And first principles thinking it's like a muscle, it's a discipline, it's a way of approaching things. So let's start with this question. If there's a spectrum from raising no money at all to raising tons of money, where do you want to be on that spectrum? And the answer, of course, is it depends. It depends on what company you're building. If you're building a really capital-intensive company like SpaceX or Anduril, then you're going to have to raise tons of capital, or you're going to have to already be rich. So how did Palmer Luckey do it with Anduril? Well, he built a different company first. He built Oculus and sold it to Facebook, now Meta, for like $1 billion. And then he took his winnings of that. So let's just say he owned, I don't know what percentage he owned, but let's say he owned 30% of that. And then he had a very strong starting position to go build a capital intensive company and still have ownership and control in that. But he wasn't starting from zero. It wasn't his first company. Same thing with Elon and Tesla and SpaceX.
Yep.
He had already exited PayPal with $175 million in 2004 dollars. And so he was in a good starting position to do capital intensive things.
So you're weird because you did not have, your big $1 billion exit before you played your jazz.
Yeah.
Like you got to have your cake and eat it too.
Sort of. I mean, I definitely paid my price, which is that I came up with an idea that was capital efficient.
That's pretty good.
But it didn't require zero capital. I think that's your designs are quite unique.
Well, you see, they've got fold lines on the paper.
Yeah, you're following the instructions.
Well, loosely. Poorly, actually. Very, very poorly.
I'm trying to remember the way my dad would do these.
Well, by the way, look at this one. It's like the craziest fold.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Invisible required some capital. It did not require no capital. And so I had to convince, but it was one of the things that made it work was that it was a non-obvious idea. What was the idea? The idea was there's Salesforce in 1999 was the first SaaS company, software as a service. Software was the technology, but subscriptions were the business model. Before Salesforce, people forget that software was sold by selling CD-ROMs.
Yep.
And you'd buy one CD-ROM, one license, and that was it. And then afterwards, you'd pay a monthly amount. And instead of a CD-ROM, you just get it from the internet. And so Salesforce's first logo was no software, which what they were really saying is there's software, but you don't have to buy the CD-ROM. You just pay for it every month. That worked so well that for the next 25 years, every enterprise software company that was built was a SaaS company, was selling subscriptions in the cloud.
Yep.
And all of these were tools, apps. So the founding question of Invisible was, if there's an app for everything, why isn't everything perfect yet? And the point I was making was that it was this overabundance or oversupply of tools, of apps, was creating an absurd situation for the buyer, for the customer, where you're going to have to somehow stitch together hundreds or thousands of tools. Like, where does it end? At what point is there too many tools? And so to use the analogy of a cake, if the customer wants a cake, Silicon Valley will not sell them a cake. Yeah. Silicon Valley will only sell them tools to make a cake.
So you have really high conviction on a model, which has been like ultra validated from like Palantir, ServiceNow, Invisible.
It's validated
everybody.
today, 10 years in.
Yeah, 10 years in.
Yeah.
But like, let's say there's a founder out there that has that idea that's like the next 10-year idea.
Yeah.
How did you get the right board around you from day one? And how did you create the governance from day one to then at year 10 have the control to be able to say, I still believe in this so strongly, I'm going to take money out of this thing that's like a golden goose and create another golden goose.
Yeah. I did not make no mistakes.
Yeah.
So I had the contrarian idea. It was so contrarian that many investors didn't get it. Some investors were willing to take a flyer, and I wasn't able to raise money on great terms. Like actually, we raised $7 million we raised before profitability, of which we used $6 million, was very dilutive. We sold almost 50% of the company to get that, but we raised them on safes. And then at some point, we did do a price round, and I did give up some controls. I maintained majority control of the board, but there were certain protections that preferred shareholders had that could block me on doing some things. And I ended up regretting that later, and it was an amateur mistake. This time around, I wouldn't make that mistake, but you got to learn the hard way sometimes.
Why didn't you just split the company equal ways with all the founders?
It's so funny. In the early days, we didn't split it equally, but it was we had a partner pay model that had tiers, and all the pay was transparent. And so it was a hierarchy, but it was formulaic pay. Yeah. It wasn't communism, but it was sort of like.
I mean, I think it's important to have, like, from my side, like, one person always needs to be like holding the gun, like who has control.
Yes.
And I think that's like, you like made some mistakes to get there, but you jumped on the right lily pads to get to the right spot. So first lily pad was maintaining board control.
Yes.
Then what? So like then what happened?
Then what happened was at year 6, at year 4, it was like unclear if the company was going to work. It could have failed.
Was it the same people on the board the whole time, or like who are the types of folks on the board?
The board was there was no board until year 4, and then year 4 or year 3, I think it was year 3, we formed a board with one other VC and myself. And I technically had 2 seats and they had 1. So they had some blocks.
Yep.
And then very close run thing. And then we had a lucky break in year 4.5, 4.5, where it's like we went from a 1 mil run rate to a 3 mil run rate in 2020. And we founded in October 2015. But the previous year, we were stuck, plateaued at a 1 mil run rate. So it was like very... dicey. And I'd already decided before we ended up tripling that year that we were not going to raise a Series A, and we're going to push for profitability, and we're going to figure it out. So I aligned everyone's incentives with profitability, which was a little bit paradoxical because we would, take 2 steps forward and then take 1 step back.
Was your VC like pro with that, or did they have feelings about that, or were they just like really supportive of you at that point?
The benefit was that because they didn't have board control, they didn't have operational blocks on the company. And so I had discretion over things like this. And because it didn't seem to be going well, on some level, they were writing it off.
Yeah, no, like when the minute you say like, oh, we're going to go to profitability, the VC writes it off, and then they try to like keep your relationship because they want to back you in the next company. So like
back you or just not piss you off and not ruin their karma.
Yep.
So then it worked. We tripled the company without raising additional capital. And then the next year, we more than tripled. We went from a 3 mil run rate to a 10 mil run rate. And we got to profitability at an 11 mil run rate with $1 million of EBITDA. At that moment, everyone was like, you should raise a Series A. It's working. It's scaling. And it looks like it's going to keep scaling. You're at an 11 mil run rate with $1 million of EBITDA. You're in year 6. And it looks like this thing has no end in sight. You should raise and deploy a bunch of capital. And I did a bunch of math, and I talked to... Over time, you learn, you're doing calls with shareholders and investors and board members, and you end up realizing who the smartest person in the room is. And for me, the wisest, highest signal voice was Charlie Songhurst.
Charlie, he's a prolific investor. He's probably like the most active angel investor. He's backed both Invisible. He's on Invisible's board. He's on Infinity's board. He's a close advisor to both of us. And he's on Meta's board. Mm-hmm. And so he's been a huge part of both the companies. Yep. And so just giving that context out on who Charlie is and why that's important.
So Charlie is becoming better known now, but he was, to use the French term, an éminence grise, a gray eminence. He was hidden in the shadows. And he likes being the person that founders trust to call in moments like this.
How did you find your Charlie, and how would you have other founders find a Charlie? And by the way, founders should go and totally try to get an angel check from Charlie. He's an amazing partner, but not overly plugging Charlie. But like,
Charlie values his privacy. I mean, he's going to hear this and he's going to be like, "Oh, stop talking about me." Again, going to first principles.
Yeah.
Instead of, here's the irony, because we're talking about Charlie. There's going to be founders listening to this podcast, and they're all going to find some way to hit up Charlie. And then there will be 10 more founders asking him for advice than there were for every one founder before. The way to find the next Charlie, and this is a training in contrarian thinking. It's just the reason why it's a good question, Brennan, is like instead of going for the person who's popular or powerful or has all the money or everyone else is talking about, you have to just listen to the words that are coming out of people's mouth and ask yourself, is this an insightful person? And you don't just analyze the words cognitively, logically, but also ask your heart, ask your gut. Like, does this person have wisdom? Does this person wise? Yeah. And over time, you end up developing a quality known as discernment. And discernment really matters because, to quote Heraclitus, fools seek counsel from those they doubt. Don't take advice from people you doubt. You have to they have to earn your trust first. Yeah. And then he goes on to say, applicants for wisdom do what I have done. Inquire within.
If I did not have a Charlie and I was trying to find a Charlie, it's really about just getting, for me, and the advice I would also give is like, you have to trust your gut. Like all my biggest mistakes have been going against my gut.
Yep.
And then once you have that person, they're ride or die for you. And so like mentorship like serious investors are really, really important for these companies. So you had your serious investor, you had board control, you had profitable business. So you were in cactus mode and you had some leverage for the first time in a long time in Invisible.
But I didn't blow it. The real contrarian moves happened around this time.
Yeah. I think 99% of the market would go out and raise a Series A.
And what did you do? I looked at our cap table. I'm like, we're 50-50, 50% owned by myself and the team.
Can I toot your horn a little bit? Because I don't think this is talked about enough. Yeah. I think it's most founders at this stage, they own 80 to 90% of their company.
Yeah.
The employee pool for that size of a company is 8 to 10%.
Yeah.
And I would say like most founders, you're coached to have the ESOP be around 6% because investors actually know you're not going to deploy it and they'll evenly spread it out to everybody.
Yeah.
And you gave 50% to your employees.
That's right.
And
well, it got even better. It got even better than that.
Again, that's a thing, and maybe it's just because like I'm your friend and I like building with you. Like, I don't know if I would have done that. And I think that that's an incredibly generous thing and an incredibly cool thing. But I also know you're a system design grand architect. Why did you do that?
Yeah. So to be clear, it was not communism.
Yeah.
But it wasn't socialism either. Really, it was we were very committed to this principle of being a meritocracy. So all the shares we granted were under vesting schedules. Yep. But it was also born out of necessity. It was a bit of Cortez burning the ships, or Simon Bolivar having his army cross the Andes barefoot in the winter.
I had to.
I had no other choice. And why did I have no other choice? Because investors didn't get the idea in the early days. Because we were not building a SaaS company, it was more operationally intensive, and we did need great A+ talent. Yeah. So the only way to get great talent to leave great companies, for example, one of my best friends from college, Marshall Sutherland, he went to Cornell and then he was at Bridgewater, and he was entrepreneurial, and I convinced him to leave Bridgewater to come make like $5,000 a month, and which was a big pay cut for him. But he did it. Why? He did it because I gave him a path to a large equity ownership percentage. But what that created culturally was a very Spartan culture.
You also accidentally or intentionally hyper-aligned shareholders, yourself, and all your employees, which I think a lot of founders fuck up.
Yes.
So like you had your Charlie, you had massive, you probably have like Charlie Munger level alignment across the organization. You had a business that's working. Every founder I know would go raise a Series A, and you're like fuck that. Why?
Why? Because of Charlie Munger. Because Charlie Munger is the ultimate first principles thinker. I mean, Charlie said, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome.
Yeah.
So I realized we had something pretty magical because everyone was rowing really hard and they were thinking like the company. In other words, before Marshall would do something, in a normal company, I'm using Marshall as an example, but this is true for all the key team members of the time.
Everyone should definitely go find Marshall and talk to Marshall. He's great.
He's great. They would think about what was happening in the company, and instead of thinking, what's in it for me, or what can I do, or whatever, what's the easy way out, they would think, what is the best thing for the company? Why would they do that? Because they weren't getting paid that much in cash. They owned, their entire bet was in the equity, and so whatever was good for the equity was good for them. And that created the right behaviors. And so why was it the case? I looked at the ownership of the company. 50% was owned by myself and the team. 50% was owned by investors. And I looked at who was rowing hard. And maybe the team was rowing really hard, but only like a small percentage of the investors were rowing hard. Most of the other investors had written us off.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that. And then I realized if we raised a Series A, it would go from being 50-50 team investors to 70-30 team investors. Or even worse, really, because there'd be an option pool that would dilute the team further. And I realized it would destroy the culture. And then I did the math on how much profit we were likely to generate as we grew and what investments we would need to make to support the growth. And it seemed to me that capital was not the rate limiting factor in our growth, that talent was continuing to be the rate limiting factor, and that we could keep that talent flywheel going without needing to burn money, that we could make more and more money every year for the foreseeable future.
This is why you're a prolific system designer.
Yeah.
Like no one in the planet in that moment. And I remember this time with you, and you're like, I'm designing my board and I'm gonna like do this and do that. And I was like, you're fucking crazy. Like we were having coffee like a couple blocks away in the Upper East Side. And I remember telling you, like I gave you the worst advice of all time. And I was like, Francis, like, why are you like fucking around with this board stuff? Like
focus on.
I was like, go raise a Series A, like do your thing. Like Francis is just like playing business with this board governance. You remember that?
I do remember that. And that was actually good advice.
It was awful.
It was just not the right advice for me at the time.
Like Twitter founder advice, which is why I'm like, if you're reading Twitter founder advice, I'm like, that's like the word. Like I'm pretty sure it's all just like generated by like one team in a country that's just like, oh, this sounds great. You know, like the other week, I was talking with an investor and they were like, oh yeah, like I think everyone's been like working super hard. I'm like, no, every investor I know has like been out of country and like not working, not taking meetings. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're all just telling each other they're like working super hard just to like make each other have FOMO. So anyway, sorry for the awful advice in that moment, but like, it's okay. So you had these Spartans rowing crazy hard. You had profit. You did the math. It made sense. You had good hyper incentive alignment. The Series A is the easy button, but you had some debt. Like you had investors that had written you off, as they probably should have for their LPs to like not focus on you.
Because we were weird.
Yeah,
because we broke all the rules. We weren't a SaaS company.
And
I
like
didn't have
they're paying power law. So
that's
like
right.
you and I invest. So like, you know, you have to focus on like where your things are. But like
their reaction was, what is this profitable service company that is like claiming to be a technology company that's gonna, you know, claiming that it has a path to $1 trillion EV, but his first company failed. And like, you know, it broke all the pattern.
So what did you do?
And so what did I do? I did the weirdest thing, which is I raised, there's a line of Jesus where he tells the disciples to cast their net to the other side. Like do the opposite thing of what you were doing. And so I raised debt instead of equity. Instead of raising equity, raise debt and use the debt to buy out the equity. Well, it was actually super above board. So we raised $13 million of debt. Yeah. The equity investors had access to our financials, and I went to the investors that had written us off the most, that were the least involved, that were adding the least value, and or who just were passive. And I had good relationships with them. I still have good relationships with them.
Like that's the thing that's like crazy about this is like you didn't go in and like you are alpha, but you didn't go in and like pull some like aggressive hyper alpha whatever thing. Like you actually like went in and like helped them return money to their funds.
That's right.
And further aligned and consolidated your position.
I gave them a great deal. It was a win-win deal. There were zero shareholder lawsuits. There was no bad blood. There's no bad karma. Everyone who sold in the buybacks got anywhere from 2 to 10x their money. Like people made money
on something they had written off completely.
Right.
Which is like insane.
Also, the debt investors made money. I got lunch with the debt investor who we exited a couple years ago, and he actually was last summer we exited him, and he made almost 2x's money, which was the best number one returning investment in that debt fund. And it was for a 5-year hold. So 5-year hold, and he 2x'd his money, which is amazing. The equity that we bought back more than 10x.
From like a human level, how do you like? My perception is that you're very like upfront, hyper direct, hyper honest. Like, what is your formula for engaging and building a relationship with investors? Because you have a high degree of trust across the board in that space. Like, what's your formula for that?
It actually starts out with not a formula, but like a emotional commitment, which is if I treat the money as sacred and I treat the relationship as sacred. So if somebody's trusting me with their money, whether it's theirs or their LP's money, I understand that I'm a fiduciary to make them make money. My job as the founder is to make everybody money,
but to swear
and not lose their money.
But so many founders fuck up by treating that so sacred, and you have to at some point be like for your first company with Peter Thiel investing, like you have to everyone's burn that money to invest in R&D, do your thing. Like the LPs know it, the VCs know it.
They're accepting risk.
You know it.
Risk is part of the game.
We all are here, and I think you have to play your game. So how do you square the circle of that, but then also still you're making a bet on a call option that's so out of the money?
Yeah. The integrity starts with I'm going to do my best to do right by the company and do right by shareholders. And then you start to pick up on situations where, a shareholder, a class of shareholder may not be aligned with the long-term best interest of all shareholders, i.e. the company. Yeah. And so you start to work those things out. But in this situation, so if you're fundraising, if you're raising equity, you're going to investors and saying, on these terms, invest in this security, and this is going to align our incentives with building a company that's going to go to the moon.
Yeah. I think a lot of incubators, there's a lot of stuff out there on how to do that and how to market that well. And in fact, I think it's probably overly disingenuous. How do you do the back end of that, of actually building a great relationship with a Charlie Songhorst or any number of the VCs? Specifically, how did you build such a good relationship with the VCs that you're hey, here's 2 to 10x. Here's your money back. Yeah. I'm going to go build this $1 trillion company now. Yeah. And then a lot of these guys are still investing in the next things that you and I are doing. Yeah. And that to me is fucking magic. Even Elon Musk, when he invested in OpenAI with him and Sam Altman, there is tensions around who's cap table and what, and XAI and OpenAI and all of this stuff. How have you been able to pull off this thing? And my hunch is it's something about your personality, and there sounds like there's a strong ethics and strong North Star on investor money for you. Mm-hmm. But then what's the follow-up on the back end on how to build that relationship?
Sales, hiring, and fundraising are all sales motions, and there's the potential for some amount of disingenuous selling in all of them, because you can raise the expectations too high.
Because most visionaries are pitching the castle, and the castle's not built. So that's the inauthenticity of it.
And so I believe Invisible will become $1 trillion company. However, I'm able to present all the risks and all the challenges and the sequencing, and which actually represents truth better.
Yes.
The reverse sell is just as important as the sell.
Yeah. Or the trust hack.
That's right. Right. And then the other thing is that really the relationship after the close is the real relationship.
Yeah. As someone who works with you in your businesses, you're BCCing all investors on internal emails. You're very public. Yeah. You're to the point where I would say there's probably I think there's stuff out in the public domain on this where it's some folks have felt uncomfortable about that in the business.
That's right.
And I actually think, and all the investors that we talk about, they're please continue to be really open like that. We love it. We want to come engage. We want to be helpful. Yeah. And I actually think the best investors are really okay with the mess. They just want to be with someone who's there's the authenticity, but then it's the big fuck you vision. And that, I think you've just perfectly expressed sort of like how you built that relationship, right?
By the way, that has had to evolve stylistically, and it will evolve post going public. Like once Invisible is public, I won't be able to BCC investors on emails. But
I don't know if you wanted me to tell people that. But YOLO.
YOLO. It is true that is how I ran the company, and now I'm trying to figure out how do I maintain as much alignment as much transparency as possible in a new paradigm. But to answer your question, there are 5 ways that equity turns into money again. And the first is an IPO, M&A, secondaries, buybacks, and dividends. Those are the only 5 ways. Those are the only 5 ways out of shareholder jail.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of founders, like you are a student of all this, and like you've just been like chewing through books and reading.
But I don't have an MBA.
I have like a master's in finance, and like half my class, I guarantee if you went back, like couldn't fucking articulate that.
That's actually the power of the classics, is that like, even though I didn't have an education or a background in these things, by banging my head against the wall and asking the right questions and asking for book recommendations and reading the books and whatever, I eventually wrapped my mind around it. And now that I've wrapped my mind around a lot of these concepts, they're actually not that hard, and I like explaining them. Yeah. So in this case, at this point in time for Invisible, I didn't think we were going to go public, but I didn't want to sell the company because I believed that we would compound over time.
So you had hyper alignment on your shareholder base. You had hyper alignment with a great debt provider. You had a profitable business that was going. Sounds like the world was your oyster at that point. Yeah. What did you do next?
We bought back 20% of the equity. So now the cap table looked very different. 70% owned by the team.
Wow.
30% owned by investors. I renegotiated the board role so that I was able to reconstitute the board and turn it into a 5-person board where the other 4 people were very aligned with me, but the protective provisions that were blocking me from doing the interesting stuff I wanted to do went away. The book that was the guiding light came from William Thorndike's Outsiders, which focused me on the long-term financial metric of long-term shareholder IRR, which is a fancy term, but I could explain it in depth. But basically, you want to compound the equity as represented price per share over time.
It's like Berkshire Warren Buffett.
It's the Berkshire idea.
It's like invest and believe in what you believe in, and it should be around, like you should never want to disinvest from what you believe in.
Yes.
So before we go into a bit of that theory, like you had these board members that were hyper aligned. Like how did you select and find, and we don't have to like say who the people are, obviously, to keep them private, but like how did you find the archetypes of all these people and like assemble your cast of like really it's like your second team? And I think a lot of founders miss this point where they're like, I want to have board control and I don't want anyone on my board. And I'm like, dude, if you're going to take capital or debt, you're going to get someone on a board. Like, why would you not want like epically useful people on a board? So how did you design that first board, and who are the archetypes that you brought on?
Well, pop quiz. How do you fire a shareholder?
You can't unless you secondary them.
You buy them out.
But they have to agree to be bought out.
They have to agree to be bought out.
Yeah, so it's like easier. I say this a lot to other founders. It's easier to get a divorce or rescind citizenship than it is to get a shareholder off your company, which I think
correct. Because property rights are real. And so you have to respect the security. You have to respect the property rights. And so I respected them, and I knew that I needed to work with them. And so it was more like a marriage than like a date. I had to commit to working with them. And so actually some of my / our biggest allies today, I was in an adversarial but polite relationship with in this period of time. In the sense of like, we were on the opposite side of a negotiating table for a period of like a couple years in some cases. And through that, we gained great respect for each other. And eventually when we got back on the same side of the table, then they were true allies. So
it's again back to the butterfly and the transformation. You can do the same thing with investors and board members. So you now have all the governance, all the provision, everything set, and you're able to basically like take money out and start almost like placing bets against the vision that you still originally want to have with the company.
That's right.
Which is epically cool.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that like I'm a part of that second chapter, but
you are part of the chapter.
But like for me as a founder, and that's why I really wanted to go deep and really specific with you on all this stuff, because I think so many founders like they read your piece in Forbes, or like they go someplace and like hear you talk with your foundation, and they're like, man, Francis is this like epic individual that like somehow was able to pull this off. And I think to like the outside untrained eye, it feels so much more chaotic because like that butterfly and the catalyst feels natural and feels chaotic and accidental, but it's actually like hyper intentional in a lot of ways. Can you tell me about basically like the next wave of intention in your life and like what is the next metamorphosis?
Yes. Invisible always had a huge vision for building end-to-end solutions and integrating hundreds of AI and automation and software tools into one end-to-end solution that could, build any capability, run any process for any organization, any individual of any size. So at the end of 2022, I realized that even though our revenue was skyrocketing, we were at a 25 mil run rate. Next year, we were forecasting a 100 mil run rate, which we ended up hitting. That our enterprise value was skyrocketing, but our vision was shrinking. And the beauty of great ideas, which is, again, a book saved me, which was Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen.
Yep.
And so I don't take credit for the insight. All the insight was Clayton Christensen. All I did was apply the book. And the insight was this. Invisible did need to focus. It needed to focus on enterprise and public sector clients that could start out spending about $1 million a year and someday spend $10 million or more. That's a nice one.
I know. I followed the lines. Oh, that was pretty good.
That's a good one. Let's see.
Oh,
whoa, that one could fly.
That
one could really fly.
Here's another one for you.
All right. This one's cool.
I want to do this. Look at this tie-dye one, dude. I'm going to do
So
this.
the idea in the Innovator's Dilemma is that the only way of continuing to go after all the adjacencies and all the ideas that you have is to either separate them into different divisions, different lines of business, or even different companies entirely. And you could do that through an incubator, through a spin out, through whatever. And that if I had tried to fight my team on focus, I would have lost. Like fighting gravity doesn't work, you know? So I realized that my team was grinding harder than ever, and I could not distract them from the grind. So I hired, at this point, we had just won board control, and I immediately hired a CEO, Ben Plummer from Bridgewater, and Ben was better at me at the execution motion, and he had more energy to do it. So it worked out great. Like there are lots of things that I had become good at doing, but I didn't enjoy doing, like running the Monday morning leadership team meeting, reviewing plans and budgets and OKRs, doing performance reviews, and just the day-to-day grind of executing and scaling a company is really, really tough.
Yep.
Like going from a 25 to 100 mil run rate in a single year, without going off the rails, is a lot of blocking and tackling. A lot of blocking and tackling. And I knew that needed to be done. And at this point, it was like 8 years into the company, and it was my second company. So if you had the first company, that was not what I wanted to be doing that year.
Yep.
Ben did it. Instead, I began to take cash out to start Infinity Constellation, and we started 8 companies.
Yep.
That were similar to Invisible, but they were going after spaces where Invisible was not.
Yep.
So one was Invisible for small business and medium-sized companies.
So let me be kind of an asshole.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can sit on the podcast and like pitch our businesses all day, and you're very good at this because you've now created some epic businesses.
Yeah.
I want to get you also have created a foundation that's using AI to translate Sanskrit.
Yeah.
You're also you help think of a company called Lightning, which is digitized the philosophy and the classics and created an AI over that's a consumer product.
Yep.
I want to pop up a level and get a human level beyond the business. So your first metamorphosis to me was okay, I'm going to keep eating glass. And then the biology turned me into this hyper alignment machine.
Yeah.
Now you've created such capital and network effects are on capital, human, and board level that you're able to sort of go out and grab next level markets.
Yep.
What is the next metamorphosis, do you think, or do you not know?
For me now?
Yeah. Well, from a human level.
From a human level, well, the creativity expands when you honor discipline. Like discipline gives you more rope over time because you're honoring the constraint. So those 8 companies were capital efficient, but now we're 2.5 years later, and they're at I love the numerology, infinity, with 8 companies in August of this year, the 8th month, generated $8.8 million run rate. So it's now working.
You just make me sound so good.
Yeah,
it's because you have such a great CEO.
And it is actually because I have such a great CEO. Because again, the same way I brought in a CEO for Invisible, and then ended up bringing in a second CEO, Matt Fitzpatrick, who previously ran McKinsey's Quantum Black. Like, Matt is the right person to run Invisible. Today he in the same way, you're the right person to run Infinity.
Yeah.
And so there's actually, in a weird way, humility can create a lot of freedom, right? Like,
no, I mean,
if I was attached to like running these things, and the irony of the Forbes article is it called me a control freak, and it's much more nuanced.
But
than
you
that.
do have like founder mode, and but you and I are very much like as co-founders, like a yin and yang, and like. Yeah. And to be honest, like I told our producer this. I literally thought, even though it took me like 6 months of talking to you and Songhurst and everyone to come in and help create Infinity after I sold my last business, I literally thought, like even as your friend, I was like, dude, we're probably gonna like flame out in 3 weeks, just because like we're both like we have really like different opinions. Like we're both built companies. Like I didn't come from like a big company that's going to come and do this, but
you're probably thinking there's a good chance that Francis is going to be a pain in the butt to work with.
And you probably thought there's a pretty good chance that Brennan's a founder and not going to want to collaborate and do whatever, right? And like, I think that yin and yang amongst co-founders is incredibly important. And what I didn't realize, but that one looked really pretty. Sometimes they look pretty. This one's here. We got to pick a. Oh, that one says dragon. You need that for Pendragon.
There we go. I like that.
So like co-founder selection is sometimes really funny. Like, and I keep getting like surprised by it. Yeah. And I didn't understand how kind of like good of a team we were until I tested our intellectual DNA with our AI Virgil, which they basically like go and like studies the classics and the philosophy frameworks. And you and I both have like a love of Greek philosophy, and we both are incredibly first principles, even though we're like very different.
Yeah.
And that to me has been like very magical and really fun.
Yep.
And so, I'll lead you even more into like what I think your next metamorphosis is.
Okay, great.
I'll be such a good host. I'll tell you.
Tell me.
Like I see you now using these network effects you've created in really super powerful ways, right? Like,
cool.
So you're going around the world, like you have offices all over the world with Invisible.
Yep.
We have investors in the Middle East and everywhere.
Yep.
And I see you starting to like really leave your mark in an incredibly cool way. So like there's one notion in startups, like we're all surfers, right? And there's like an AI wave or a cloud computing wave or a mobile app wave, and we ride that wave. And some of the founders, their goal is to ride that wave and come off the wave and secondary and do their thing and keep riding waves. And they're out in the surf.
Yep.
You're in this magical moment where you've rode this epic fucking wave, and you're in like this 100-foot wave outside of Portugal. And that wave, like, I believe AI has got a long way to go. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to go a ton of space, but it is a wave. Mm-hmm. I think what's going to come after that are skyscrapers. And I think your metamorphosis in this next chapter is going to be from wave to skyscraper builder.
I like that.
Where do you see, like, what are the biggest skyscrapers that you're going to build in the next 10 years if, like, assuming everything held constant?
So if you...
Because you're this grand architect,
Yeah,
right?
the architecture.
And I know you know this.
Yeah,
and I know you have it written in a notebook somewhere.
Yeah.
So tell it first time ever, exclusive, not another podcast.
Total world domination or save the world plan or, how do you play it out over time? First of all, these games take a long time to play out. So Larry Ellison just overtook Elon Musk as the world's richest man yesterday. But part of that story is that even though Oracle is smaller than Tesla, much less Tesla plus SpaceX plus all the Muskiverse combined.
Yep.
It's still almost $1 trillion company. But he started buying back stock in 1992 and basically bought back consistently over a very, very, very long period of time. And he owns 42% of Oracle.
So how do you, really, really quick, and a lot of founders out there, they ask me this, like, when I quote something or you quote something, like, how do you find all this information and this nuance. And I think there's a lot of history in how companies are built and what's been done.
Yeah.
How do you stay up to date? How do you get these examples? Like, you're clearly like a student of entrepreneurism.
Yeah.
How do you keep your pencil sharp?
I'm always learning from the people I interact with, and I happened to interact with an executive at Oracle recently and asked a lot of questions.
That's a great example, just like you were doing with the investors, building the super ultra long-term relationship, and you're continually building network effects. So now, like, if you are an AI, like we have like Francis GPT, we can be like, what are a business model with a framework that does this, 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 and this? And like, you and I actually do this a lot as co-founders, where like we're sitting in here and we're like, okay, like, how do we think about capital allocation? And you're like, well, Constellation Software is like this way, and like this is how they do it, and like we actually have quantitative allocation, and I think that that's such, like, I am much more of like you know, a gut guy, but like you're a true, like, I'm a shitty student.
No, I don't think so.
You're a very good student.
You're
and
very
like,
sharp. Yesterday, we were in a meeting with an investor who was teaching us about a business model, and both of us were riveted, and we were asking lots of questions and taking it apart, and we both learned something in that meeting. And so I just think there is a lot of learning from experience, but I do believe in learning from books and first principles, because eventually, I guess I believe in the power of theory.
Yes.
Now, theory...
You're a framework guy.
Frameworks always break, and this is where Zen Buddhism and any philosophy that focuses on paradox, truth usually lies in paradox, where you realize that, like, you know, every theory can be broken. Every every thesis has a counter thesis, has a synthesis.
The Matrix is a great movie around this, right?
Yeah,
like Neo is created, and then Agent Smith is created, right? That is like,
for every principle, there's a counter principle. For every law, there's a counter law.
The Matrix, by the way, is like one of the best like movies around like religions and
really
philosophies.
Yes.
And like once you're a student of that, like there's everything.
You're living in
that,
a simulation.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, like, you study, most religions, and you'll come to a kind of a similar view.
So how do you keep that spark alive for like lifelong learning? Because to me, like, a lot of people, okay, you have, I won't say the valuation of invisible, but like if you're training 80% of the world LLM models, and you have the revenue you have, like you're on $1 trillion trajectory, right?
Yep.
So I think most people that are the chairman and founder of this business, like you stop, like, people stop learning. Like, I've met a lot of different investors and folks that have done what you've done, and they seem to stop learning, and there seems to be a cadre of people that keep learning.
Yep.
Why do you keep learning?
Because actually, I think why we're here is the evolution of our soul, and we're all going to die. And so you're not going to keep your money after you're dead. There's a 100% tax rate on death.
Yeah.
Even if you plan your estate well and you tax optimize, you hand it off to your successors. After, your sons, your daughters, your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, at some point, there will be, even if your wealth keeps compounding in the world, there will be a generation who doesn't know you, and there will be a moment at which your will, written in some document, doesn't really matter anymore. And so
the music stops.
The music stops. So what I do have a belief in that I am not my body, I am not my mind, I am my soul. I do believe that the soul is eternal. If we can learn the hard way or learn the easy way or some combination.
Yeah.
But this external show, this external reality, which seems real, is really stimulus for internal evolution.
That's really well put. I'm gonna start calling you the philosopher tycoon. So, like, since you touched simulation theory, I'm gonna go there because I know we both like video games, and you're probably like one of the more preeminent entrepreneurs on like the capabilities of AI and like what they're doing on the forefront, just given Invisible's position in the market. Like, we're, like we very much could have, like, for those of you that have read Ender's Game, like they have the ever evolving games. Like Elon Musk just is backing a AI video game studio.
Yes.
Like can you talk a bit around like what has you really excited? And I'm assuming you're excited about gaming and AI.
First of all, Cloud Dragon is about to take flight. Oh, it's pretty good.
That was actually the best one.
That was
the best one of all. Air Pendragon.
There are almost 9 billion people on the planet. There's a lot of human beings on the planet. And something like 30% of global GDP is knowledge work, people sitting behind computers doing work. And there's talk of, AI is going to eliminate jobs. I actually think the percentage of GDP that will go to knowledge work will increase to something like 50% by the end of the century.
That's really interesting.
And I don't believe, AI and automation will certainly eliminate some jobs. For example, contact center jobs are going to radically evolve. They're going to change dramatically. But I don't think it will eliminate jobs because there will be new jobs created. And I think there's this dialectic between, we train computers to do something that humans can do, and then humans do something else that computers still can't do, and then could train computers to do that. Some people, arguably those who read too much sci-fi, believe that this will eventually go so fast that like computers will be better than humans at everything, and there'll be no gains from trade. Others believe that like we're going to install a chip, and the chip is going to create a cyborg basically, where the brain-machine interface allows you to, instead of having GPT in your laptop on your phone, it's like in your mind, and you are GPT, and it's sort of a relevant distinction at some point. And then we evolve into something transhuman, where it's not Homo sapiens anymore. It's
so how does gaming? How does my question about gaming get us into transhuman cyborgs? So tell me about that.
So I think the question is, what will humans do? What will be entry-level labor? And I think Ender's Game has a really interesting hidden startup idea there, which would be a really exciting moonshot for us to do. So for anyone listening who wants to work with Brennan and I on this, I think we're definitely talking about it. It's a moonshot. And imagine there was a company called The Simulation or Simulacrum or something like that. And it was not universal basic income, but universal basic employment. So any human being anywhere on the planet could, we'd ship them this kit. It could be a virtual reality kit. It could almost be like entering the Matrix. You're immersed in a video game, and let's just say you're playing this video game 8 hours a day. This video game is fun, immersive. It could be time travel. It could be like almost like Assassin's Creed or like StarCraft or some sort of video game. But it is dynamically evolving to you and your interest. It's teaching you, so you're actually getting an education. Maybe you can get the equivalent of an undergraduate or a master's degree by playing it. So it is growing your skills. But more importantly, it is learning from you, because the ability for AI to pass the Turing test at some point is going to require a level of immersive experience with humans where it learns to think how we think. It learns to behave how we behave. And I think that it may be the case that the ultimate AI training platform long-term is a video game that is watching you.
Also like think about...
You are the product.
I have a lot of like friends with ADHD, and they really struggle with school and work, but they also are like epic video game gamers, and they're like really good at it. And it's because like what I've heard is there's basically like feedback loops back through that keep them engaged, and it's basically like I'm not a doctor, but it's a better way for them to engage and be productive. And so if you were to reinvent this new way of work, it actually would help a lot of different people too, because it's probably like really hard to go into Chase Manhattan Bank and like type in an Excel spreadsheet for 8 hours a day. But it actually, like, imagine if work was a video game, and that it ever evolved to what you were playing and what you were doing. And I think that that's a very interesting connection to make, because there's lots of folks building, I think, what is going to be like super generative AI, like Grand Theft Auto, but like it's just going to go for infinity, right? Like think of what Minecraft was 20 years ago, but like now with AI, like what that could be, that'd be like a really fun game. But now you sort of said, I'm linking two different markets. I'm linking what the world is going to need for AI mixed with the new, basically like the new way to work and the new way to like extract thought processes from people, right?
There is something scary about the idea, though.
It's super dystopian in some ways.
It can be dystopian.
Yeah.
It can be utopian. Like what if
all technology?
What if the game is so immersive that eventually you're just on an IV drip while you're playing it, right? And what if it's so immersive that you can even play it while you're dreaming and you're sleeping? And what if it's so immersive that people don't want to leave? But then again, on the flip side, and this is the more utopian thing, what if it does create universal basic employment and everyone's making money? And what if it also creates universal basic education? If you play this game for 10 years, you exit with, not just an undergrad or a master's degree, but having lived many lifetimes. There's this Alan Watts clip called The Dream, where he says, imagine every night you dreamed 75 years of life.
Yeah.
And in the first night, you could fulfill all your wishes, live out every fantasy. And then the second night, you could do all the ones you didn't get to do the first night. And eventually you get bored and you'd start to introduce some randomness and some challenges, some things that weren't exactly what you'd planned. And eventually you dream the life you're living right now. And so at that point, you start to wonder whether we are already in a simulation in a video game, that the Big Bang was like the gods booting up the computer and to see what we would do. And so it does introduce this question of what is the fundamental nature of reality? What is base reality? Are we in base reality right now, or is this not base reality? And it also introduced a question about the economics of the 21st and 22nd century, which is if instead of needing millions of human hours to train AI models, you end up needing billions or trillions or tens of trillions or quadrillions
I think it
hours.
also depends on like what AI ends up like being used for, and like what is like humanity's need for AI. So like there's like very much huge network effects coming off of this.
Huge network effects.
It's a super, super interesting concept. So speed run on questions.
Yeah.
5-second reply or less if you can.
All right.
Toughest thing about building a new company?
Hiring.
How do you listen to your gut as an entrepreneur?
Meditation.
Best decision you've made in the last 5 years?
Hiring CEOs.
What is the biggest thing that you want to work on in the next 50 years or 30 years? Assuming if life doesn't extend, but 30 years.
Assuming that the corporate platform generates huge amounts of capital, I think if you have a capital generation machine that generates billions, then deploying that in philanthropic uses is exciting. And I think we've forgotten about culture.
So this is the last speedrun question. If you were to write a book, what's the title of that book?
The Sovereignty Game. But that won't be the last book.
Oh.
There's a lot of books I want to write.
Cool. So we got an exclusive here on the podcast.
The problem is when I write, I feel like all of my words could be burned like straw compared to like the words that have lasted for hundreds or thousands of years. This is why I like to use quotes in my writing, because I'm not sure my words are going to last or my words are good. If I can be a bridge or a door or a portal to like access the wisdom of Heraclitus or Lao Tzu or Socrates, then figure out how to apply it today in 2025. That's good. So I try to ground all my writing in the classics.
Killer. Thanks for coming on the pod.
I loved it.
Super, super happy to have you.
We're going to keep having conversations for many years, Brennan.
Yeah.